Manny Ortiz had $16,000 of camera gear stolen from him. And it's not just the gear, but he lost the ability to shoot for that entire trip to Italy he had planned. We had our friend Lewis, who was followed home an hour and then robbed at gunpoint of his medium format gear. We have all become targets, and the reason is simple. Camera gear is easy to steal and high profit to sell.
We reached out to a bunch of camera companies and asked them what they're going to be doing to solve the problem, and we heard back from some of them. We're also going to talk about one camera brand who implemented anti-theft tech successfully. So we'll talk about what they did right and what we think other camera companies should do. But first, we want to thank our sponsor, Squarespace, for making this podcast possible and also for making great websites possible. If you can drag and drop, you can make your very own Squarespace website. It's so easy to do. It's attractive. It's professional. And it's free for 14 days. Go to squarespace.com/Chelsea. And if you like it and decide to buy it, you can use the coupon code Chelsea to get 10% off. Thanks, Squarespace. Okay.
First, let's talk about some easy ways to make yourself a little bit less of a target, like things that we actually do. The first is we have air tags on everything. Yeah. I have an air tag on all of my camera straps. I have an air tag hidden in my camera bag and my suitcase. And these are useful. Like we were traveling in Italy and I walked out of the restaurant and I left my camera on the table. And I got a notification on my phone, like, you're no longer with your camera. I was like, oh. And we turned around and it was still there. And Thankfully. We just picked it up.
Yeah, they're not perfect. They're not going to deter theft, but they can help you track down lost gear or sometimes even stolen gear. There have been stories of people tracking down the thieves because they didn't notice the air tag.
Yeah, that era is probably done now. Thieves probably all know about air tags.
Well,
there's no good way to completely hide it.
Yeah, it is. They're probably going to be checking, but that's just theft. It's always a cat and mouse game. So they figure out what people are doing to prevent theft, and then they circumvent it again. Another thing to do that you should do is get your gear covered by your insurance and inventory it. So you want to take down all of the serial numbers of your gear and then get insurance for your gear. We do it through our homeowner's insurance, but you can also do it through specialty camera gear insurance like PPA. They have been our sponsor before. They're not our sponsor for this video. But I've heard great things about them. And I think Manny even used them and got his money back for his gear.
Yeah, he got paid for his gear from PPA.
Also, not a perfect system. It can up your insurance rates. You don't always get back the full value of your gear. It's not always easy or pleasant to do. So, none of this is foolproof, but that could help you recover some of the costs of losing your gear.
You're probably not covered by default. If you haven't talked to your home insurance company about it, you need to have that talk.
Yeah.
What about defensive measures? Like, do you think people should act out against thieves? Like Lewis, when the burglar showed up at his house, he tried to drive over them with his car. Well, you should listen to the whole discussion.
Yeah, we had a whole other podcast and a video and we interviewed Lewis. He was in the news. It was a big thing. I think that Lewis acted in the moment, but ultimately the thief ended up firing a gun. Thankfully, it wasn't towards Lewis. It didn't hurt Lewis. But when I know it's emotional to lose something physical and personal, but it's not worth your life. And people have been killed for their camera gear. I know that every time we bring this up, people say that they would have certain items on them to hurt the thief. Maybe that would work.
I get this. I'm a Texas boy.
Yeah.
I grew up with this attitude of you need to protect yourself. But the fact is, it's not worth escalating when you're talking about stealing property. Right? You don't go to hurting somebody because they want a piece of your property, even though that might feel right.
Listen, I watched Roadhouse with Patrick Swayze.
So you're an expert on
So I happen to be an expert on de-escalation, and that's why he was the best bouncer, because he knew when to de-escalate until he did rip a man's throat out. And if you haven't seen the movie Roadhouse, you really should.
The original.
It's delightfully terrible, but there is a lesson in there. You do de-escalate. Now, of course, this is your personal choice. I don't want to die for a camera, so I'm going to choose to just hand it over and be like, well, this stinks. Guess I'll report it to my insurance. And then your other option is just don't bring a camera, which sounds ridiculous, except I've been with you.
I do this all the time now. We're going out at night in a city or someplace which might not be safe, and I'm looking at my $6,000 camera, and then I'm looking at my smartphone. I'm like, is the improvement in the image quality going to be worth the additional risk, not just of losing the gear, but of becoming a target, perhaps getting entangled in somebody and then having to file a police report just to be able to do the insurance and losing all my pictures? or is my phone good enough? And I hear from a lot of you, you're saying, I decided just to bring my phone. We've had professional photographers who give tours, see that we were in, well, it was Barcelona in this case, and he said, you know what?
Our whole group got hit by a group of thieves, so be careful. They'll see you with a camera and they will target you and work as a group to steal your stuff.
And when he called, I just put my camera in the hotel safe, and I did the best I could with my smartphone.
It also wasn't your camera. It was like a borrowed medium format camera, so...
Yeah, but I make the same choice. And even when we went to Italy recently, I didn't bring my Sony A1. I brought a less expensive camera.
I did too.
I almost didn't bring it. And this is why maybe camera manufacturers need to implement some anti-theft, why it's going to be profitable for them. Because if we feel safe bringing our cameras out, we'll spend more on cameras and we'll use them more often, and more people will get them.
There actually are more expensive cameras I want, but I'm not buying them because I'm not about to take it somewhere and be a sitting duck.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a big person. If I saw me carrying something that was $10,000, I would totally push me over and take it.
Well, lots of people are big people. Like, have you seen Manny? That dude looks real tough. He got robbed.
That's true. You could be tough and someone would still rob you. Well, they're clever. They're in groups. They're distracting you. They know the city better than you. So what has been done already? Well, some things that we've tried. When Lewis was robbed, he was very motivated to help other people. So he and a group of his photographer friends included us in making a petition for people to sign it, photographers to sign it, and tell camera manufacturers that we do want protection. We do want our gear to have anti-theft technology. We got 5,000 signatures and no response from any camera company.
Nobody has done anything, except this one company that actually did something.
Yeah, we'll talk about them later. But more recently, before we made this podcast, of course, we always like to give the people we're talking about another chance to talk. So we reached out to some camera brands, asked them what they're doing, if they've made any updates, and some of them did get back to us, like Sony said that they would talk to people, but we didn't hear back.
They would have internal discussions of whether they wanted to talk to us about it.
Yeah, and then Nikon said that their plan is that you could take down your ID number of your gear, and if it's stolen, you have to have a police report. If you take that police report to them, they'll put it in their system. So if that gear is sent to them to be repaired in the future, they'll know it's stolen. So it doesn't really deter anyone from taking your gear because it's not going to impact anyone until it's like already sold. So I don't know, that is something. I just don't feel that that's going to protect me.
Yeah, and again, we just try to raise awareness. We've been making videos about anti-theft features for about 5 years now.
Yeah.
And I would ask that we and every other camera reviewer start bringing it up every time we review a camera. If it doesn't have anti-theft, we should point out, I wish it had anti-theft. Because I have found that when a bunch of camera reviewers ask for something, it eventually comes true.
Yeah, you know what I think is difficult about this is that people don't seem to care until their gear gets stolen.
Yeah, we have to each individually become victims. But the fact of the matter is, quite a few of the gear reviewers we know have already become victims.
Yeah, I had another friend who went on a trip and had all of his gear stolen before Safari, so he got like $16,000 worth of gear stolen as well. It's happening and people don't always talk about it. I think it's a little bit embarrassing because something you'll notice whenever someone is robbed, a lot of people in the comments will say, you should have done this, you shouldn't have done that, you should have done it different, you should have paid attention, you should have worn a weapon, you should have, and it's like, I understand why people victim blame. Mm-hmm. They probably imagine that if they did everything right, they won't be a victim, but that's just not true. It just happens to people, and we need to do something to stop it. And one brand has had some innovation.
We'll talk about that in just a second, as well as a bunch of suggestions we have for free firmware updates that camera manufacturers could give us that would make us all so much safer. But first, I want to thank our sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace is your home on the web. For your business, for your portfolio, for your personal project, start at squarespace.com/Chelsea. You can get your own custom domain, so you're not gmail.com anymore. You look professional because you are professional, because you're presented in a beautiful light with no advertisements or links to other people.
It's also organized,
right,
and professional, so you're not digging around trying to figure out what's going on. It's very intuitive, clean, and professional.
Take appointments, deposits, sell products, whatever you can imagine starts at squarespace.com/Chelsea. Get a free trial, 14 days, no credit card required. After you love it, the coupon code Chelsea gets you 10% off.
That's
Thanks, Squarespace.
CHELSEA. Okay.
This camera company that actually implemented anti-theft and has a good track record, it is making a difference, is DJI.
This
Now,
is their second huge innovation that's blown us away. Because first the Pocket 3,
Yeah.
we thought, uh-oh, they're coming for traditional camera market. And now they've actually implemented anti-theft in a way that's deterring thieves and lowering their profits.
And a lot of people don't consider DJI to be a camera company, even though drones and things like the Pocket 3 are extremely popular and have made a huge difference on photography in the past decade because it doesn't look like a Sony A7 III.
The form factor is a little different.
Yeah, but what DJI has done is when you buy a drone from them, before you can use it, you register it. You just log in with a username and password to their website, and it's linked to you. And every, I think, 90 days, you need to log in again. If you don't log in, the drone is limited. It'll only fly like 25 feet or something, and it says you have to log in. If you decide that you want to sell your drone, no problem. You just unbind it from your account, and the next person who picks it up, it's like it's a brand new drone. They register it to their account. But if somebody steals your drone, they go to sell it, the next person can't use it. It's heavily limited, and they know, they will definitely say, hey, I need you to unbind this, and when you can't unbind it, they'll know that the thief is not the actual owner of it.
So, but you don't know before you buy it if it's bound or unbound?
Well, theoretically, somebody on Facebook Marketplace could sell it to you, and if you didn't test it, then you might not know. But I do see people in forums saying, hey, I just bought this drone and I can't log in. And the answer is always like, well, you need to go back to the person. So it could be that a thief is able to trick you into buying a drone that is bound because you, as a buyer, haven't figured out how this works. But increasingly, people know to look for bound or unbound drones. It's taking a little while for consumers to figure out this little intricacy.
Well, but the thing is, when you have an unbound drone on the second market, you are labeling it as unbound.
Right.
And then it's selling for more money.
Right. So I did an inventory of drones sold on eBay, and the unbound models sold for about twice what the bound models do. And that is good in two ways. First, if for the secondhand market, you're getting more for your legitimate drone that you have unbound. Thieves who are selling bound drones are getting half as much, and that's reducing their profit margin significantly by more than half because they have some overhead with registering it, stealing it, the risk that they take. So it's reducing the profit margin so much that it's not going to be a worthwhile business pursuit for a lot of would-be professional thieves.
Yeah, and the thing is, these professional thieves actually do their research. So the person that stole Lewis's camera is not a camera enthusiast. They just figure out, I can get a lot of money for this type of camera. The Leica stores get hit a lot. People know that they're a high-value camera. And actually, when we had one of our cameras stolen online, we figured out who the thief was because he also bought our photography buying guide so that he could do some research and figure out which cameras were worth what. So they are educating themselves. They do eventually figure out that some things will be locked, some things won't, and they can make more money.
So thank you, DJI, for listening, for caring about the consumers, and for helping to protect us.
Now, hopefully, they will implement it in their other cameras because they will have like traditional cameras coming out, we think.
Right.
And now that they have the technology, I'm hoping that they put it in all of their stuff.
I'm hearing a lot of you. You're saying, I don't want to be a target, but I hate security because it always comes with some inconvenience. And even in the case of DJI, when I search for that, I find people who are frustrated that every 90 days they need to log in. It's happened to me where I went to use my drone and it's like, enter your password. I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
But we're entering passwords all the time. All parts of our life have security constantly. If you're watching this, you're almost certainly logged into YouTube and you had to enter a username and a password that had to be authenticated.
Of course, I think logging in gets a little bit annoying. I have to log in every time I use my computer, but then I'm also glad other people can't access my information and it's protected.
Right.
I'm glad that my phone is locked, my car is locked, it has a security alarm, it also has GPS. So every day I'm authenticating on multiple levels, all of the things worth protecting, except my camera, basically.
So security is necessarily at least a little bit of a compromise, but it does work. It does make us safer. We can look at a couple of case studies, cars and smartphones. Back in the 90s with my 83.5 Honda Prelude, nice apple red, I had to put the club on it because cars were getting stolen all the time. The club was this big bar that you put on the steering wheel, and if you didn't take it off, then it would like not allow you to steer properly.
Wow, we need a club for our camera.
Well, we really do. And it was desperate times to have to buy some aftermarket thing that was incredibly inconvenient. I had to use a separate key to unlock it every time I went to use it. But it was still worth it to not have my car stolen. But car manufacturers heard that and they said, okay, well, there are things we can do to mitigate the risk. They started labeling everything with VINs so that it would be more difficult to sell it. They nowadays, just about every car has built-in GPS and cellular connections so that you can always track your car with an app, or police can track it. That's like what you had to buy LoJack for in the past. It's now built into every car. And as a result, if somebody steals your car, you can probably track them down.
But it's always been a cat and mouse game. Mm-hmm. So they implement some type of security and then thieves figure out how to work around it. I think they figured out how to like replicate keys of really expensive cars, and they were just stealing them directly from the dealership, driving them to like a boat, and then just sending them across seas to sell them somewhere else.
Yeah.
So they are always figuring out ways, but then, then we find out a way to stop that. The one example of that was that people have been stealing catalytic converters on cars, mm-hmm. and they just implemented a law around here where you like can't buy them secondhand anymore, and it's cut back on that number of people doing that.
Cat thefts are down drastically, and car thefts since the 90s when I had my LoJack are down by about like 75%. These anti-theft measures absolutely work. And in fact, most of the cars getting stolen are older cars that don't have this technology.
But it's not 100%.
No, it doesn't need to be 100%. You just want to reduce the risk.
And that's what I hear people complain about when we bring up this topic. They're like, well, it won't stop them. Nothing's ever going to stop people from stealing. They're still stealing cars. They're still stealing a lot of things. But it shouldn't be so easy. We should at least make some attempt.
Smartphones are a great example because smartphones, a thief could literally just put it in their pocket, right? And my smartphone here, $1,500. Except if somebody were to steal it, it would be almost worthless. They could maybe get $150, $200 because they would have to break it down and sell it for parts. They would have to send it overseas basically to some factory in China, which does happen. Smartphones do get stolen, but they were stolen at much higher rates before they had anti-theft measures like authentication. You're required to authenticate before you can do anything. It has tracking in it, even when the battery is dead. If a thief steals a couple of smartphones, there's a good chance somebody's going to track them down. That raises their risk. That makes it less attractive as a target to them. Smartphones still get stolen, but they get stolen at a much, much smaller rate. And as a result, we're comfortable spending more on smartphones. That's why smartphone companies did it.
Smart.
Because they could sell more expensive devices because you weren't worried about getting robbed.
Yeah.
And every time another device that's not a camera implements more anti-theft, that makes cameras that much more attractive.
I know.
Because thieves they're just be like, okay, well, what can I make money on? Oh yeah, that guy with that medium format camera, that can be mine.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you implement these things, like we're saying, it's not perfect, but it takes more time for a thief to make profit, right? Because now they either have to scrap it for parts, or if they have to try to figure out how to sell it, if it won't unlock, it's kind of more of a pain, so it's a little bit less desirable. There's more risk involved because they might have to go through riskier behaviors to steal your stuff.
Yeah, and if it's more likely that they'll end up in jail, they're not going to want to do it as much.
Yeah, and then there's also less profit. So like with the bound versus unbound DJI drones, they want the higher profit margins. They might decide, that's not really worth it anymore. I'll move on to some other piece of tech that I'm going to get more money.
The vast majority of criminals are doing so for money, and they do use business tactics like considering the effort versus reward versus risk. And we just make it a little bit more uncomfortable for them, and those go down. It doesn't go to zero. We just want it to go down. So what can you do?
Yeah, let's talk about what could be done. So of course we gave the example of what DJI is doing, where you have to authenticate to use the drone. But there are other options as well, and one of them is having a lock screen on the camera that just says, this camera is lost or stolen, like you can return it here or contact this number for a reward or whatever.
My concept is I tried to come up with the easiest to implement and the least inconvenient anti-theft measure. And I propose just every time you turn the camera on, it says, this camera is not for sale. This is the owner's information. If lost, contact for reward. And if a thief steals your camera and they go on Nextdoor to sell it to somebody, when that person turns the camera on and they see it is lost or stolen, they're going to be less likely to buy it.
Yeah.
You might still find somebody willing to buy a camera that they think is stolen. That still happens. But there aren't as many buyers and they won't pay as much. And chances are good, if you're showing this camera to a bunch of potential buyers, one of them is going to get suspicious of you, maybe turn you into the police. So you're lowering the profit for the thieves and you're increasing their risk. And it's costing the camera manufacturers just whatever it takes to make a small firmware update. I would just have this be a setting where you put in your name and contact information and protect it with a password. And if you reset the camera settings, of course, this one setting would not reset. And is it perfect? Could a thief go in with an EEPROM programmer and overwrite the flash memory to change that? I'm sure. But again, now you're requiring the thief to take more time, to have more expertise, and all of it just means it's more difficult for thieves. But this is just the most simple possible idea that I had.
This isn't the best idea, but this is cheap, implementable. There's no excuse for not implementing something like that.
Yeah.
And then there's also PIN numbers. We already put those into our phone. It would take 1 second to put it into your camera to unlock your camera.
And no, you wouldn't have to do it every time you went to grab a quick shot. Maybe you just have to do it once per day. Maybe you don't have to do it when the GPS notices that you're home or when there's a Bluetooth connection to your phone. And it could be optional. You wouldn't be required to use it, but you could turn it on. And if enough of us did, then that would start to make a dent.
You wouldn't have to lock your camera, just like you don't have to lock your car.
You can leave your keys in your car, and some people do.
Yeah, some people do leave their keys in their car and they leave it unlocked, and sometimes it doesn't get stolen and sometimes it does. That could be like your camera.
Of course, with a PIN, you start to run into problems like, what if I forget my PIN? And the modern solution for that is you reset it through your email or something, but that requires an online connection. But all modern cameras have Wi-Fi. It can certainly connect to the internet to do an online login like we do with DJI drones. And I think that's the next big step. Let's log into our cameras on a regular basis. We do that everywhere. You're logged into Google right now. It's not the end of the world. That could bring a lot of other benefits, like I could save my settings to Sony's website, and the next time I bought a new camera, it could transfer my preferences for things like back button autofocus.
That would be cool.
There were so many other things that it could do, in addition to allowing me to log into Sony and marking a particular camera as stolen. And then the next time that camera turns on and checks in online, it says, sorry, this has been marked as stolen.
This could be profitable for you camera companies too, because once you have people logging into your database, you could be selling them storage for their photos or something like.
Yeah, just keep in contact with them, send them firmware updates or sell them future firmware updates, because now you know what they have, but people don't register their cameras because they don't log in.
Well, there's no benefit.
Right. And people will also say, what about the lenses? The lenses cost more than the cameras often, so they'll still steal it for the lenses. Well, you can implement security into the lenses. You could communicate through the camera body and check the serial numbers and do all kinds of authentication. This is pretty straightforward and well-defined, and the camera manufacturers know how to do this because they're all currently working on the Content Authenticity Initiative, which is sort of combating AI by marking genuine images as genuine, but it uses lots of cryptography and digital signatures, which are the same things that you would use to validate the ownership of lenses and register them.
It could all be within the same system at this point. So they could be combating AI for their own protection. They could be authenticating for our protection.
Hopefully encrypting files, because privacy is part of security too. But I think the difference is, the reason they've ignored anti-theft, but they are working on anti-AI, is the business customers are asking for the anti-AI stuff. They care more about those people than they do the consumers, it seems.
I guess so. People argue about anti-theft all the time, so maybe they think people don't want it. I don't know.
Yeah, they're asking the wrong people.
They could also implement the tech found in AirTags and just put it inside the camera. There's no way to really affix it to your camera where a thief can't just remove it. So it should be on the inside, and it wouldn't be that expensive. It'd be like $20.
Yeah, Apple supports third parties. You can get bikes that have AirTag tech built in, and that way the thief can't pull it out because it would break the entire camera. Biometrics make a lot of sense. That is using your fingerprint or your eye in order to automatically unlock it. It's just an easier way to authenticate because it could happen automatically.
And some of these companies have that tech already. I mean, Sony makes smartphones, so they must have fingerprint technology. They could put that right on the shutter button and boom, you're automatically in.
Yeah, and fingerprint readers cost like $5, and you always put your finger in the same place, right? It could be so easy, and again, it wouldn't have to be every time, but once a day or something, or log in with a PIN. But the ultimate is really some sort of tracking and remote communications. I desperately want GPS in all my cameras anyway because it's so cool to take pictures and be able to see them on a map. So please put GPS in, but then also give me a cellular connection. People get real freaked out by this. They're like, whoa, now my camera's gonna know where I am?
Well, you don't have to do it. That's another thing. I mean,
could turn it off.
if you're freaked out, that's fine. You don't have to like open it up, implement it, or pay for it. But some of us want it, and it should be an option. And it's affordable too. Like to have it put in your watch, it's like $10 a month.
Yeah, that's what I pay for my watch. My old pickup truck has a remote start with an app. And it cost me $3 a month. And it is continually connected to the internet. I know where it is at all times. They could absolutely do this with every camera, and they really should on a $6,000 camera. They could easily like build in 1 year of service for free. And then after that, you'd be required to pay because I'm sure you'd learn to appreciate knowing that your camera was not stolen or knowing where it was and having your images tagged and such.
Yeah, I mean, that one just doesn't seem difficult to do. And then with the GPS and cellular built in, you could do the tracking, remote locking, and you could wipe all your files if you have sensitive information.
So why haven't they done this?
Because I just think it's like a game of follow the leader. I mean, remember when Sony was the first making like full frame mirrorless and all the other companies made fun of them, and then when it was successful and profitable, they just copied them? Right now, DJI is implementing this technology, but it's not in a traditional camera form factor. It's in a drone, which people really just use for imaging. It's just another form of recording imaging. I mean, if DJI moved it to a more traditional camera, I think that they would realize they had to keep up if they were selling it as a feature. But right now, it's just like more megapixels, more frames per second. You know, they're just all competing over the same things. One of them has to take the risk and do it first, and I think they're all afraid to take a chance.
Yeah, and as long as they can say, well, nobody else is doing it, then it doesn't make any difference in camera sales. But if one of them did it, I promise there would be an audience for you.
Well, let's just say this. If I had to choose between two camera brands that I like, and one of them had anti-theft technology and we travel all the time, I would pick the other one. I mean, a lot of cameras are like neck and neck at this point. They're not that much better than the other one. If I knew that I could travel and feel safe, then yeah, I would totally buy it. And I'm sure a lot of people feel the same way.
Here's what you need to do. You need to reach out to your camera manufacturer and tell them you want to see some anti-theft. When somebody reviews a camera, you should ask, does it have anti-theft? Because this needs to be a discussion point for every new camera. Every camera reviewer needs to be bringing this up every time you review a camera, and we will do that.
But I think what's difficult is that people don't want it until they become a victim.
Right.
And so that's really tough because people want to believe it's not going to happen to them.
Yeah, we have the illusion of having some control over this.
So I guess if you want it, you know what to do. You're going to have to ask for it. But otherwise, will they do it? Unless DJI pushes it into a more mainstream camera, I don't think they'll do it. I don't think they like taking chances.
I've been working on this for 5 years and I've seen almost no progress. DJI accepted. I appreciate you, DJI. I do hope it changes. I'm going to continue to push it. I hope you guys will sign the petition and contact the camera manufacturer because I'm not ready to give up. I'm not ready to just use my phone so I won't be a victim anymore. What say you? Write a comment.
Thank you, all of you, for watching the Picture This Photography podcast, and thank you to Squarespace for making it possible. If you want your own Squarespace website, go to squarespace.com/Chelsea and use the coupon code Chelsea to get 10% off. Thanks, and see you next time.
Bye.